Welcome to Janome Club. For this month we are looking at the taping guide foot. Now this foot is available in a 7 and a 9mm version, so if you, depending on what machine model you have, just need to contact your local Janome store and they'll be able to sort you out with the correct one for your machine. So this lovely foot has got a sort of short-toed foot that attaches to your standard presser foot holder, and then it has this lovely contraption off to the front and side which allows you to put pre-made bias onto the edges of items. So there's two screws on here for some adjusting. So we do have a screw at the back here which adjusts the guide left and right, so depending on where your needle drop position is you can adjust that. And then down the front we have a little screw here that we can adjust to the finished size of our bind. So if we were doing a 1cm finished, I would line the black line up there with the red 10 mark. If I was doing a 15mm finish, I would just screw that until you can see that little black line moving until it lines up. So you would just adjust it to whatever the finished width of bind is that you are doing. Now I don't know how much, I'm just gonna, if I move it, sorry, I'm just trying to get it in a position so you can see, yeah, here. If you have a look just here at the front, you should be able to see that this is the bottom section. It is ever so slightly over from the front section. So if I put my little stylus in here, you can see that, and what this is it allows that the bind, when it goes on, is ever so slightly bigger at the back, so that when your needle is stitching here, you're definitely going to catch the back part of the bind. So that's just something to that I find really important about this foot, is that the back is like 1mm or 2 bigger than the front of your bind. Now this is a single edge bind, so what that means is that you will have your bias strip. So this is fabric that's cut on the bias, and then either you've bought pre-made bias or you've used a bias tape maker to press this into position. And what they mean by a single fold is when I have that running over the edge of my fabric, there is only one layer. So this is my one layer of fabric that covers the edge here. So you may have heard the term a double fold bind and a single fold bind. This is what it means by single fold, is there's only a single layer of fabric at that fold point. So I find this a good binding method for when you want to get quilts done very quickly, or when you have don't want to cut your own binding strips and you've bought a packet of pre-made binding bias, that you can easily then whip that around the edge of your quilt or your item. You can also utilize this for straight cut fabric when you're doing straight edges and corners, but for your rounded edges items you do need the bias. Again, we have our lovely blister packaging, that has information on the back about the width that you can cut your fabric and how to set up the guide and all the information about it. Now the other thing we will be utilizing today is our knee lifter. So a number of you may have one of these in your sewing machine accessories. It just depends on what model you have. I believe it starts at the 5300, is it? I think is the first model with a knee lifter. Anyway, there'll be a list below of models that you can get a knee lifter for. And when I find it really good is for machines that do not have an auto foot lift. So some machines will automatically raise the foot. We often call it a pivot function. The knee lifter comes into its own on machines that don't have that function, but you can utilize it with any machine that has a knee lift port at the front of the machine. So if we go over to our machine here, today I am sewing on the Memorycraft 6700P. Now right at the front here we have two sort of sections. It might be a little bit hard for you to see. There's a large section here that looks a bit like a disc with a coin sort of slot on it, a little slot for a screwdriver. That one is for adjusting your stitch balance, so that's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is this second hole, which is actually a hole. So there's actually an opening there. And what you do is we take our knee lifter here, and this part of the knee lifter attaches into that hole. Now the other thing I will show, on quite a number of our models that have the knee lifter, they now come with this, you can see it there, they come with this little adjuster, so you can loosen this screw to adjust the angle that the knee lifter sits at. So, and to put this in, it's simply a push in, and that is attached to our machine. I'm then going to take my foot, and again, it's just through the normal shank, so it's just a matter of putting it behind and underneath our foot. I then hold the black button at the top and pull the foot up, and it is engaged. Now with the knee lifter here, I know it's right at the edge of your screen, but when I am pushing my knee out, you will notice my foot goes up, and then when I let my knee go, the foot comes down. So again, I'm pushing my knee out, and now I'm letting my knee go, and that raises and lowers. So the same as if I use my lever at the back, I can raise and lower my foot, but this allows it so that you can keep your hands on your work, and then you can raise and lower as needed without having to touch the rear foot lifter. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is I'm going to bind a straight edge. So I'm going to take my bias, which I've got here, I'm going to fold the raw edges in, and then I'm going to take note of this measurement. Now this one I know is set to about 8 millimeters, so I'm now just adjusting this screw until my little line is approximately 8 millimeters. I'm then going to take my strip here. Now I've got a cut edge here that's straight, so it's just a little bit tricky for me to get it in, but I've got a trusty little stylus, and I just find that I just ease that in, and I can push that in. Let's raise our foot up, push that in under the foot. There you go. So that is our bias strip already in the tape guide. Now in the tape guide there is this the two plastic parts of the guide. There is give in here. You can see that that will give you a little bit of flexibility for you to allow you to actually put your item that you're going to bind in here. Now you can't do anything too thick, but we can fit through. I've got like 2 quilted layers and some binding, and it fits through perfectly fine. I just sort of raise that up a little bit and tuck my item in between, so basically my bind is covering around the edge of what you want to bind the edge of. And then it's a matter of lowering your foot. So my foot is already lowered. I do tend to sort of help the foot a little bit along, that I sort of tend to hold the binding around the edge a little bit, but you don't have to do too much of that. What I find is that I push my item that I'm binding sort of in towards the foot, so I'm pushing sort of in that direction, and then I hold the bind in that direction, so I'm sort of pushing towards each other. Then it's just simply a matter of stitching along, and the foot is guiding that bind around the edge of my item, and then we are stitching along the edge. When we get to here, we're going to stop. We're going to raise up our needle. We're going to raise up our foot, and then I can use both my hands to pull that out and cut it off. So then we have our edge stitched, and it is stitched on the back. Oh, get into frame, get into focus, there we are. So that's the back. It's showing you there that it's stitched along there, and then it's stitched along the front there as well. So once you have that, for which camera, oh, might, here, pop down to this one. Too many different cameras for us to choose the best stop. So with this little project, you quilt up a couple of layers of some fabric and some insulated wadding. So this brand we've used is Insul Bright, but I'm sure there's other brands out there. So it's like got a silver foil sort of heat resistant wadding. So we've quilted up. You do then get your little pattern, so you want to print that out, and that gives you the pattern for the pot holder plus the little pockets of the pot holder. So you cut that all out, and once you've got your two little pockets bound, you would then place that together, and then we are zigzagging around the edge of this to secure all those layers together. We then will take this back to our machine, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to a wider bind. So to go around the outside of this, I'm going to a wider bind. So this one, again, I would fold it in half, measure this one I know measures to about 12 mil. So I'm going to now adjust my tape guide till now I have a 12 millimeter opening here. Again, I'll do the same that we did for the skinnier piece, is I'm going to place that, hold it up, place that in the little guide. Right at the start, sometimes it gets a little bit tricky, but just take your time, feed that through, and then we're all sorted. So with this one, we would start on the side and we're going to stitch all the way around, and then we would stitch off for the little hanging loop. We're just going to show you how you would do a curved corner. So again, I'm just going to raise up, oh, just clipped my little bind out. So again, I'm going to raise up this little guide so that I can slide my little pot holder in there, and I'm ready to sew. Now to come around this corner, you do need to make sure that you're not pulling too tight on the bias, but you do want to stretch it out a little bit as you come around this corner. So I'm just sort of looking here, and also there's two things. One, you need to stop regularly as you're coming around the corner and readjust your position of your work. So that's why I'm going to use my knee lifter, and also using something like a little stylus will really help you get in here to help that fabric go around the corner and sit nicely. So we're going to start sewing. Let me just tuck that under. Okay, so we've got our bias here. Now we've got this little step here. This is where I was saying we've got 2 layers of quilted fabric and then our bind, and that fits in under our guide with no problems because it does have that little bit of flex that it can move. You do just want to go a bit slowly as you go over this area because it is a thicker sort of area, and I'm just lifting my foot a little bit to let my fabric readjust underneath. Put my foot back down and take my next couple of stitches. Okay, then I can just readjust again. So my foot goes up with my knee lifter and we readjust. So when you're doing curve, it's all about taking a few stitches and adjusting. So as we're coming down here, we're nearly at the curve section. So just take it slowly. Okay, we're at a section where we're starting to want to curve. So what we do is we raise up our foot. If you don't have a knee lifter, it would just be a matter of raising up with your foot lever at the back. And then we're going to rotate this to keep the edge in nice and tight to the guide. If we need to, we can use our stylus in here to just ease that fabric in. This one seems to be working okay at the moment. So we just take a few more stitches, lift up, ease it around again if it needs it. The tighter the curve, the more times you have to stop and ease to get this sitting nice. And as I said, you may just want to help a little bit in here. I'm just in front of the foot and I'm just helping ease that fabric in. So just take it slow. Keep adjusting every couple of stitches. This is quite a tight little curve. If you are doing this the first time, you may want to do a slightly bigger curve. Like if you've got a quilt that you're doing, I give it a slightly softer curve, and it makes it so quick to put it in. And I am doing this a bit slowly to show you how you would get a nice finish. Okay, I'll stop there so I can show you. Cut off our threads. Just going to unhook this from the guide. My stitching's a little bit wonky, but that's okay. So I've tried to use a contrasting thread so you could see. So we're stitched around here, and we've got a nice, hold it up here. Let it focus. Yeah. Are we focusing here? So I've stitched it down here and around that curve, and yes, it's a little bit wonky, but I'm on camera, so you know, you get a bit nervous when you're doing these things. So, but this, then you would then bind all the way around, and when you come back to this edge, you then trail off a little bit. I think on the pattern I've said about 6 inches, and then you loop that back on itself. Where are we? Here. You loop that back on itself, and then just top stitch over that with like your normal sort of A-foot to secure that together. Okay, so now I'm going to show you if we were going to do a corner. So I've got here a prepared quilt sandwich. Let's find our little corner. And I've got some, these is cut on the straight, but you could use bias if you want. Now this one is about, I think, 14 or 15 mil finished. So again, we'll just ease that in there. Now this is a similar technique to if you have the quilt binder. So the quilt binder is slightly different from the tape binder. So the quilt binder will take your flat piece of bias and fold it in, the raw edges in, and then in together. Whereas this tape binder is more for pre-made bias, or bias that's already been had the raw edges pressed in. Okay, so we put our little quilt in here. Ease it in, lower our foot. Okay, so we're going to stitch our bind down, and we're going to stop whatever the width of our bind is. We want to stop that far back from the corner. So as I said, I think this one is about 12 mil. So I'm going to stitch down, and I'm going to stop at 12 millimeters from the edge. So I'm 12 millimeters back from here, and I'm going to do a little back tack to secure my threads there, and we'll cut that off. Now we want to keep this all attached in the binding, in the guide, sorry. So I'm just raising my foot. I'm going to pull this out towards the back, but keep the binding tape in that guide there. We're then going to rotate this around so I can do the other side. We're then going to fold. It's a bit hard for me to see while I'm trying to stay in camera and not, I'll use my little, I'm trying not to get, I'd normally stick my head around the outside and have a look, but I'm trying not to get my head in the camera too much so that I don't block your view. And I'm just going to ease this back in. So I've set my corner. I don't know if you can quite see it there. I've set that corner. Then I'm easing this back until I get back to that point where I was. So I'm back at that little point on the corner, so you can sort of see my needle is lined up with the binding. And then I'm going to start sewing again. Because this is the start again, I'm going to do a little back tack to secure my threads. And then I'm going to continue stitching. And then I would just do the same on the next corner as we go. So let's pull that out. So we've got our little corner there, that's stitched down. I've got a little quilt here that we've done. So we'll come back down here. Yeah, you can see the stitching here on this one. So there's my stitching around the edge there with the corner that we've done. So that is our lovely little taping guide foot. Now I've made this as a little, I call it a fingertip pot holder. So you put your little fingers into here. Somebody said it looked like a little puppet. I'm sure you could make it right. And these are really good for when you've got hot trays in the oven, that you can just grab the trays and pull them out, and it keeps your fingers nice and not getting burnt, obviously. But yes, one of the girls said that it looked like a little puppet, and one of the other girls said, oh, I could make this as a little purse and put a popper, so you could put a press start, a bit of Velcro, something there, and you could clip it up and you've got like a little purse that you could use. So there's multi-uses for this wonderful little pattern that we've got, and I hope you've enjoyed this month with the taping guide foot.